Premier, could you outline for us what this practically means? Is it a pause for a certain number of years? It's just the main museum building and not the archives building. The museum stays open until the fall, and then does it close anyway? No. And what is the timeline here, and what are the potential outcomes of the timeline that you're thinking?
Well, maybe I misspoke, Rob. The museum will remain open in the fall indefinitely going forward. It's up to the board and the executive at the Royal BC Museum, and I remind those who may not be aware of the governance structure at the RBCM Museum. It's populated, the board is populated by development, members of the development community, members from the tourism community, archival experts, other prominent citizens. It's not a partisan board. It is populated by people from every walk of life, and they have been making the decisions to get to this point with guidance and direction from our Treasury Board on what's possible in terms of financing and so on. What we're announcing today is that the plan that we tabled 40 days ago has stopped, and that the museum, through its leadership, is going to undertake consultation and engagement with British Columbians, not just in the capital region, but indeed across the province. I know the CEO is very excited about that. She's new to the position. Her strength is engagement. She's already done extraordinary work in the short time that she's been here, and engaging with staff and engaging with volunteers, who are, of course, the foundation of our cultural sector when it comes to ensuring that people get access to, whether it be music, literature, or our historical collections. So I'm confident that the engagement will be exhaustive, and it is open-ended. It's at the call of the museum board and the CEO as to how they undertake that, where they go, what they talk about, and how long it takes. What I can say is that we are continuing. We're well advanced on the collections and research building. It is under construction, and we're confident that it will be built on time, and will be able to house the vast majority of those items that we were so very concerned about and continue to be concerned about going forward.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
Sure. I appreciate your taking responsibility as Premier. How did this get through the executives and the ministry that sat us down for 2 hours talking to us about it, the museum leadership, Treasury Board, your cabinet, your minister, saying that, kind of describing criticism of this initially as somehow anti-protection of our historical artifacts? How did this get so far, and when did you realize that you needed to pull back, and how did you wrap your head around changing your position there?
Well, I maintain that based on all of the variables that have been made abundantly clear through the business plan, and I'll remind those who are unfamiliar with this, we're still waiting for a business plan on the Port Mann Bridge. The business plan for the Convention Centre was produced after 2 Auditor General reviews. This business plan was tabled within a week of the announcement. We took 5 years to try and find the best way forward to rebuild and reimagine the museum in its existing location, and also meet the challenges of trying to do a renovation in a building that had massive amounts of asbestos, basically a hazmat site once you start cracking open the walls. Not today. I want to assure those who will be visiting the museum that they will be safe. However, as you're doing renovations in an environment like that, you're going to have to close certain sections of the museum. So we looked at the plan. Again, it wasn't over a weekend. It wasn't over a year or two. It was a 5-year undertaking on top of all the work, quite frankly, that the previous boards and previous CEOs had done since 2005, again, when my reckoning of this became apparent. So we did the best we could to put forward the best plan possible. I support the plan. What I don't support and what I can't allow to happen is for the public to believe that this is somehow an abdication of responsibility on other files. It's not an either-or. We were doing the largest investment in education capital in BC history, building out SkyTrain lines east and SkyTrain lines west in our major urban centre, new hospitals, a whole host of other investments with capital dollars. And the museum represented about 1% of the annual capital budget over the 8-year construction period. So it was, how did it get to that point? We felt it was the best possible outcome. What we miscalculated, and what I take responsibility for, is that the public did not come on that journey with us. I, of course, as the head of cabinet, have been getting updates on this and any number of other files over the past 5 years. The public was not. And with all of the other challenges that they are facing in their daily lives, gas prices, food prices, rent, mortgage payments, the prospect of increased interest rates, challenges in healthcare, the public felt that we were putting all of those to one side just to focus on the museum. That wasn't the case, but that was the perception. And I just did not want this very important institution to become something to be kicked around as part of a laugh line at a dinner party or at the soccer field, when it needs to be embraced as something important to all British Columbians and indeed all Canadians. And so I believe the right way to go is to step back, take responsibility as the head of the government, and see where the consultation takes us.
Next question is from Binder Sajan, CTV.
So, Premier, just to be clear about this, so this current plan that was put forward has been scrapped. Is that the case? And also, how do you respond to critics who say this decision, despite, you're saying the public had a different perception of what was actually going on, shows that your government was out of touch with British Columbia's concerns?
Well, let's put ourselves in context, Binder. We've just come out of a global pandemic. Traditional consultation processes are often done in town hall meetings, renting halls, having people attend, make direct interventions. You go to any council chamber in British Columbia, public hearings are held where people come out and they state their views. When you're doing online engagements, which we had to do through the pandemic, it's difficult to ensure that you're getting your message out to the greatest number of people. You make expectations based on number of clicks and screen views. These things are well beyond my capacity to understand, but I'm sure many people watching at home will understand that it's difficult to gauge what your penetration into the community has been on these issues. What I heard very clearly, and I stood at this very podium less than a week after the announcement and lamented that what I thought would be a positive announcement was greeted with a thud. And from that point on, it became clear to me that we needed to pause this project. It may well be that this plan is the one that the public says, yes, that's the best way forward. But we now have an opportunity when a heightened awareness of, first of all, the importance of the museum to us. Before there was a Ministry of Education, before there was a Ministry of Transportation, at the same time the City of Vancouver was founded in 1866, the province created a provincial museum. It's not something that just arrived in the 60s. It has been part of our traditions and cultures and our legal responsibility for a long, long time. I took that for granted. The public didn't know where we were going. That's all on me.
Follow-up, Binder?
Yeah, just wondering if you've had any discussions with Indigenous leaders. I know there were some who were saying that this was the wrong project because they wanted to see their cultural items returned, and just wondering, how those discussions have been going.
Well, Indigenous people aren't homogenous, just like interior residents, coastal residents. Everybody's different. Everyone has a different perspective. Some Indigenous communities are anxious to have their artifacts and their cultural practices taken out of the museum and returned to the territories where they originated. Very true. Others don't have the capacity for that and have been working with the museum since about 2016. We've been funding repatriation initiatives since we came to government, the first time ever, so that we can ensure that those who own the artifacts have access to them either in their territories or have an appropriate space at the Royal BC Museum so they can practice traditional ways, they can have ceremonies with their artifacts in the museum. And that's been a practice that's been underway for a number of years. So there are going to be different interpretations from different people. As I say, coastal First Nations may have a different view from those in the interior or in the north. I have engaged with a number of Indigenous leaders recently. And there's mixed views on that. So that is also another, I think, a strength of the diversity of British Columbia, whether it be those who have come as a result of the expansion of Europe and the colonization of Canada, or those that have been here for all time. I believe that this is a great opportunity to say, wow, are we the luckiest people in the world? How many people have come to Victoria to see the culture of British Columbia in all of its forms over the past 50, 60 years? A lot. And I want to see that continuing into the future.
Next question is from Vaughn Palmer, Vancouver Sun.
Thanks. Premier, I got an account last night from a couple of visitors, members of my family, who toured the Provincial Museum. They paid $5 to go in. They said,
Looking for a refund, Bob? Is that-
yeah, they discovered why it was only $5, because what they found and knew the museum well is that an awful lot of the best known and most famous historical exhibits are already gone. So I'm interested in your comment on keeping it open when there's not an awful lot left to see, and also the decision to tear out all the exhibits starting at the beginning of the year before the government even announced the plan to replace it.
Well, as I said, Vaughn, there are 7 million items held by the museum, and some of them have not seen the light of day for generations. So I don't believe there'll be any challenge in filling spaces in the exhibit hall to ensure that there's a very full and comprehensive flavor of all of the history and tapestry of what makes British Columbia so unique. We did start with the Old Town, which of course you will know these are dioramas that were created in the 60s and 70s, very much outdated. That type of, if you want to see an Old Town, as I said throughout the pandemic, take a trip to Barkerville, take a trip to Fort Steele, go to those places in British Columbia that are continuing to exist from the 1850s and beyond. The dioramas, the reconstructions of our historic elements through Old Town can and will be shown in different forms. But they were part of the asbestos challenge. They were very delicately removed, and that space will now be available for new exhibits as the museum begins its engagement process.
Bon, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. The research and collections building, I believe the bids closed this spring on that job. Did they come in on target? Are you still confident that can be built for the increased estimate of costs, $224 million, that's in this year's budget?
I'm confident that the information that I made available to the people of BC through my budget estimates is accurate. We've expanded the scope of the facility. That's good news. And we believe that we can build it on the budget that we advertised.
Next question is from Keith Baldry, Global News.
Not to belabor the point, but back to Rob's second question. You've been around a long time. You've got a lot of seasoned pros in your cabinet, on your staff, in the civil service. So puzzled why no one's political antenna or spidey sense didn't start tingling here at any time through this process, or did it? And just some people expressed concerns about this.
No one expressed concerns. My colleagues didn't express concerns to me directly, nor did the professional public service. The evidence is abundantly clear that there needs to be a refresh in the Royal BC Museum. We can't avoid that fact. So I don't believe anyone was surprised that the cost was going up because we were trying to do many things in the same location while we were packing the boxes. And again, I want to remind people that these items you can't just roll a U-Haul up to the loading dock and pack up some boxes and throw them in and take them somewhere. It takes time, it takes sensitivity, and so the decommissioning was a longer period of time than I would have thought helpful. But again, I can't argue with the experts who are dealing with priceless items, and how they managed that was left in their hands, as it should be. And I'll take the opportunity to thank the staff at the museum for their dedication to their work, and to the people of BC protecting these items as they have been doing, many of them for decades. So I lift my hands to them. But I wasn't, Keith, no one came to me and said, holy cow. Obviously, the sticker price was high, but we've seen that escalating in many other areas as well, not just in British Columbia, but across the country. So we felt we could manage that. We have our debt to equity ratio, our ability to borrow in British Columbia is the strongest in the land. Our credit rating is very strong. Our economic management has been applauded by those who lend money. So it wasn't a challenge for us on those terms. So in that sense, there wasn't an alarm bell going off. And we spent literally 5 years doing this. When we came to government, there was a report that had been commissioned by the former government on the desk of the finance minister. And that is what started this this journey, and it's ending today, but the good news is that it's starting anew. And I'm very excited about the level of understanding that the public now has of the RBC Museum. This is a positive thing in my view. I'm relentlessly optimistic, and I do believe that we will now have a thorough engagement with people, and we can potentially see costs come down as new ideas come forward. Is the location the only location for a museum? Will we decentralize as a response to an earlier question about whether we stimulate more activity in rural areas and taking some of these artifacts and returning them to the territories where they came from, whether they're Indigenous or otherwise? So I think there's great opportunity to reduce costs as a result of these conversations. If we stick with the same plan, which is very much open to discussion, I would likely see increased costs over time, but let's test that through the consultation process.
Follow-up, Keith?
So you've likely diffused this issue, sticking the pin back in the grenade, but another one's going to land this afternoon, and that's the BCG strike vote results, which will set in motion a number of other likely strike votes. How concerned are you that suddenly a very large and fast-speeding train's barreling down the track of your government?
Well, Keith, there's been a lot of trains coming down my track over the past 5 years. We've done our best to manage them as they come forward, and I've always maintained that the best government is the government that manages issues as they arrive, dealing with events as they emerge. We are in negotiations with hundreds of thousands of public sector employees, not just the BC Government Employees Union, but healthcare workers and others. Education teachers, education workers. So we are doing our best to keep the wage costs down, but also acknowledging that in a time of high inflation and a time of uncertainty, that the expectations at the bargaining table are going to be high. But bargaining is what it is, and strike votes are a part of that. I'm confident that we will continue to hammer these items out at the bargaining table in the interest of the public of BC.
Next question is from Dirk Meisner, Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. During this museum, the replacement issue, there was talk that the building had seismic issues. And now I'm wondering, now that the building's we're going to continue with the museum, what do you tell teachers and people who want to bring their students into the building?
Well, I will say that the Fannin building, which is the tower where the collections are held, where most of the curatorial staff do their work, is the biggest challenge when it comes to seismic activity because of its size and the location it's on. The exhibit space is also seismically challenged, but it's no more today than it was yesterday. We've had hundreds of thousands of kids have been entertained and informed by going through the various exhibits over many, many decades, myself included. I can remember my first visit as a kid to the museum and my absolute infatuation with the exhibits and wanting to go again and again and again, much to the displeasure of my mom. There was other things I could or should be doing. So the museum is an important place, and certainly for children particularly, to capture their imagination. But it's also a time when we move away from the dioramas of my youth to the digital exhibits of today's youth. Most of the kids that I engage with today have an iPad, and they are engaging and getting stimulated by inputs that are digital. And one of the advantages of opening up the boxes and then moving them to the collections and research building is that we can digitize these items and have them online so that not just Canadians but people around the world can have a little glimpse of our corner of the universe, and that's exciting as well. But the announcement today does not change the fact that the building that houses our 7 million artifacts and archival materials is seismically unsafe, as is, I would argue, the building we're standing in right now. We are the inner harbor. I don't see anybody running for the door, but the inner harbor of Victoria is landfill. The building we're in was built on that, as was the Royal BC Museum. No activity is underway to seismically improve this building. We felt the time was right to address the museum. We'll have that conversation through the board and the chair, the CEO of the museum over the next number of years, or months or years, and we'll see where we go from there.
Go ahead, Dirk, follow up.
Yeah, one more question. And during this event this afternoon, you've come out and basically said, this decision is my decision, and my response, I take responsibility. Sorry.
I'll say yes to that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, go ahead. I've forgotten.
Yeah, well, it is my responsibility, Dirk. I'm the head of the government. I'm a Victoria-based MLA. I've just told those that are paying attention through this conference that at a very early age I became aware of the museum, and I'm very passionate about it. But I'm also passionate about sports. I'm passionate about the forest industry. I'm passionate about old growth forests. I'm passionate about making sure that our education system is the best it can possibly be. There's a lot of things that people can be passionate about and do at the same time. And my biggest regret is that the public had a perception that we were ignoring all of these other issues to just focus on the museum, and that just was not the case. And that's on me for not being clear when we made the announcement that we were also addressing as best we could the challenges that they're facing every day in their lives. And that's what people expect from their government. Sober second thought. It's been 40 days. That's long enough for rains in an arc, and it's long enough for this project to be clear to me was becoming a political item rather than an item of pride for all British Columbians. And that's where I want to get back to, and I know that's where British Columbians want to get to as well.
Shannon Waters, BC Today.
Yeah, I guess just going back to some of your comments during estimates around this project and saying that now is the time to do it because waiting will mean the costs go up, and costs seem to be part of people's concerns about the plan that your government announced. So I guess, do you see the concern about the amount of money that will likely be spent on this project being addressed in the consultation that goes forward? Will there be a more affordable option, or an option that, maybe doesn't come with quite such a high price tag by the time a decision is made, especially when there's no timeline to reach that decision?
I'm confident that the public spoke loudly on this very quickly, and I'm hopeful that as many people who express disappointment with this plan will have ideas of their own that will reduce costs. There are a range of options that we looked at getting to the point where we made the announcement that involved a whole bunch of alternatives. I don't believe that a partial rebuild is appropriate. I used an example, I think, during my estimates that you don't invite house guests to spend a couple of weeks in the front room while you're demolishing the bathroom. It's just a bad idea from a personal perspective and from an interpersonal relations perspective. And you don't invite people to come to your world-class museum when you're tearing down the walls, and the people that are doing that are wearing hazmat suits. So we can have a conversation with British Columbians, and I'm hopeful that less cost options come forward. And it's up to the board, who are very passionate about this work, not the plan, but the building and everything that it represents. And so I'm hopeful that we can reduce costs. When I made those comments, it was on the plan that was before us. I've suspended that plan. We haven't gone to procurement. No monies have been spent directly on the recreation or the reimagining of the space. That will be part and parcel of what goes forward. There has been a number of years of deferred maintenance because there was an expectation. Again, we announced in 2 throne speeches that we were doing this work. This, again, might tell us that when we do throne speeches that we should find some other way to amplify what we say. Rather than leaving it to the opposition to say it's nothing. Well, apparently it is something. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that the consultation will get a better outcome, and I think British Columbians are too.
Shannon, follow up?
Yes, I wanted to ask about a different topic. BC is one of the few provinces that is still basically restricting second booster shots for COVID to people 70 and up, with a few exceptions. Several provinces have opened it to all adults. Others, the cutoff is 50 years old. And recently, the provincial health officer suggested that one of the criteria for getting a booster right now is being someone in your 60s who's planning to go on a cruise, and that it's up to individual British Columbians to sort of make the case for their eligibility for a fourth COVID booster. What do you think about that process? Do you think that's a good way to be delivering protection for people against COVID?
Well, I'm not going to characterize your interpretation of Dr. Henry's comments. I do know that in my engagements with Dr. Henry, she's wanting to ensure that as many people as possible access booster shots. And I know that I'm going to be taking advice from her directly rather than through press conferences here today.
Next question is from Rob Buffum, CTVVI.
Well, hi, Premier. I just wanted to drill down, if I could, really sort of, I think, confirm Vinder's characterization of the plan being scrapped. I heard you mention that it's being suspended. Bottom line, there's going to be engagements. Is anything on the table? Could we have the exact same plan? Could it be in different parts of the province? Maybe not where it is now. You said that you didn't support a rebuild. Is anything possible? Where are we at?
I don't support a renovation. I think that's would short circuit the process that we need to get those materials into a safe location. That speaks to the seismic issues. It speaks to the asbestos and other hazardous materials questions. And again, I want to reassure the public that asbestos is contained. It's only when you do a renovation that potential risk is exposed. Everything's on the table. Everything's on the table. This plan is stopped. It may well be the result of the consultation that it emerges as it did in our processes as the best way forward. But I'm hopeful that the citizens of Victoria will look at opportunities for redevelopment within the Inner Harbour, what that could mean for housing, what that could mean for other economic activity, opportunities, as you articulated, to move materials out to rural locations, back to Indigenous communities, which is part and parcel of our repatriation projects anyway. So, no, everything's on the table. We're not wed to this plan. It may well emerge as the best plan, but that's not where we're going right now. Alicia Dubois, the new CEO, is very excited about getting going on this. She has the full support of her board, and she has my full support as well.
Follow up?
I'm just wondering when the moment was when you decided to stop this in its tracks. We know recently there's been numbers about inflation going up in BC, for example. I've been aware since the start of this of the price of gas and inflation generally. When did you make the decision to stop, and what was kind of the tipping point?
Well, formally we made the decision at Cabinet on Monday, but I've been obviously thinking about this from 6 days after the announcement when I stood here and lamented the response that the public was giving to what I thought was a pretty positive initiative. And that speaks to, again, to me. I missed this. And it wasn't that I was not aware of the other issues, the many issues that British Columbians are struggling with. We're working on those every day. It wasn't an either-or situation. It was, okay, they've done 5 years of work. We've got approval through Treasury Board to apportion the monies to do the work. We're still building more schools than ever before. We're building hospitals. We're building public transit. We're improving roads and doing all of the things that you do when you're investing in your public infrastructure. This seemed to me to be another component of that. As I've said, 1% of the overall budget over the 8-year period. So it seemed to me that people would receive this positively, and they did not, with very loud response. And so I've been ruminating over this on a personal level. I've been engaged in my email box. I've been talking to my colleagues from around the province, to Indigenous leaders, to business leaders and others. And it became, in my mind, too important an issue to leave to, as I said, a laugh line at a dinner party or at the hockey rink. We need to engage in this issue about how do we protect that we've been stewarding since 1886. How do we make sure we're doing it into 2086? And that involves all of us engaging and finding the best way forward.
We'll take one more question from the room. Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you, Premier. The StatsCan released inflation numbers. BC is at 8.1%, which is higher than the national of 7.7%. You said in April that Finance Minister Robinson was doing something to deal with this inflation. Now it's at record levels. When will we see that plan?
Well, I would say, thank you for the question. I would say that when the question was asked in April, we were below the national average, and now we're above. Inflation is an international problem. That's not to diminish the impact it's having on citizens here in BC. The federal government has announced some initiatives that they have at their disposal to try and dampen down inflation. We see activities in the United States as well. That would have an impact on BC goods and services. But Minister Robinson is going to be presenting her findings and the work that I've asked her to do shortly.
Follow-up, Katie?
Yes, but shortly, I mean, do we have a timeline for how soon that could be?
This is complex work, as was the Royal BC Museum. I don't think people want us to be knee-jerk about this. We want to be thoughtful. We want to make sure. Some have argued, some economists argue that too much stimulus into the hands of people will be inflationary. Others are concerned about stagflation. I'm concerned about both of those things, as I should be and as British Columbians should be. And I've charged the minister with doing the work, and she is meticulous, and we'll have more to say shortly.
We have time for one more question on the phone line. Les Lane, Times columnist.
Well, thanks. Premier, how can you insist that there was full consultation and that there was no secret that you were going to tear down the museum and spend 7-8 years building a new one, when obviously the main kind of point of the negative reaction was the incredulity and the total surprise? Everyone was blindsided by the concept. You've insisted throughout that there was consultation on this project, and at the same time you're saying that this stall is going to be devoted to more consultation. Didn't you blindside people with this project, and isn't that the fundamental reason why everybody hated it?
Well, two throne speeches, Les, and I would have assumed as the preeminent columnist in the local Journal of Record that you would have read or at least heard those throne speeches, and you would have been surprised that the government was focusing on revitalizing the Royal BC Museum. You were covering this issue over the 16 years of the former government. You would have known of the redevelopment plan in 2008, 2009. We did engage with the public. Clearly, it was inadequate. And that's why I'm putting a pause, stopping this project and going back to the public with a renewed understanding of the importance of it to the public and hoping to get a better outcome.
Les, do you have a follow-up?
On the everything that I've heard you say today, in my mind, just guarantees there's no possible way on earth that you can rebuild the Royal BC Museum on the existing site. The stuff you've said about costs and hazmat suits and the seismic risk in the inner harbor, the only way to contain costs and prevent an 8 or 7 year closure is to build it somewhere else. Is that correct?
Well, the impossibility is your interpretation, Les. There will be, if it's built on the same site, there will be a closure. There's no question about that. But there are other options. You've suggested one in your question. Perhaps it can be built elsewhere. We were going to be announcing roving exhibits. That will still happen, I assume. That's up to the board and the CEO to continue on with that component of the plan, which was to get some of the items out and on the road so people could see them. And as I said, if we are moving more artifacts back through repatriation or through other mechanisms to communities, then that will mean that we can diminish the size and scope of the facility here in Victoria. So I would, instead of taking the cynic's view, I would take the optimist view, which is my nature, and that this is an opportunity to reimagine the Royal BC Museum, which has been with us since 1886. It's an opportunity for us to ensure that 100 years from now, people will be able to celebrate our collective history. I think that's a pretty good deal.